I feel lately that carbohydrates are not being given the credit that they deserve. I see a lot of bad press about carbohydrates, don't eat carbohydrates, they'll make you fat. You don't need carbohydrates, they're not important. But the question remains, do runners need carbohydrates? Hi, I'm Rachel. I have been running for over 15 years and I am a nutrition specialist who specialises in nutrition for runners. So I'm here to answer the question today of, do runners need carbohydrates? The first thing that we should discuss is, what are carbohydrates? So carbohydrates are one of the macronutrient groups, and when we consume them, they break down into sugar such as glucose, and then if we've got too much glucose going around in our body, then our body converts that glucose into glycogen and stores it in either the muscles or the liver. So we find carbohydrates in foods such as potatoes, grains, so pasta, bread, and we can also find it in some starchy vegetables such as potatoes, butternut squash, and fruit can be other really good sources of carbohydrates. So why does our body need carbohydrates? Carbohydrates are actually the body's preferred energy source. It is kind of the energy source that it will default to when it needs it. And on top of that, carbohydrates or glucose is what the brain runs off. So our brain has been designed to run off glucose or carbohydrates, and so therefore consuming carbohydrates helps our cognitive function. There are different types of carbohydrates, so we can get complex carbohydrates and simple carbohydrates. So our simple carbohydrates are your carbohydrates such as your kind of almost sugar, so sweets would come under a simple carbohydrate. White pasta can sometimes be classed as a simple carbohydrate, and then the complex carbohydrates are the ones that are more like slow releasing, such as oats, some types of grains, and also the carbohydrates that we would get from vegetables. Now, all of these carbohydrates have their role, and there are times when we would want to be consuming plenty of simple carbohydrates, and there are other times when we would be wanting to focus on those more complex carbohydrates. So why, as runners, may we want to be consuming carbohydrates as part of our daily diet, but also around our run sessions? So our body operates off two main energy systems, the aerobic energy system and the anaerobic energy system. So the aerobic energy system is the one that we're using when we're doing such as just walking around or maybe at easy runs. So keeping our heart rates fairly low, that would come under the aerobic energy system. And during the aerobic energy system workouts, our body can use fats as its energy source because it's operating at a slower intensity and it has the time to break these fats down and convert them into the energy that we require. So the anaerobic energy system comes in when we're doing those more sort of high intensity sessions and when our heart rate goes up that little bit higher. So for example, if we're doing an interval session, or maybe we're doing hill sprints, or if you can see that finish line in sight of your slightly longer race or maybe your easy park run and you decide that you want to make a sprint finish, that is where our anaerobic energy system wants to come in. Now, our anaerobic energy system is one that needs to be used quickly, so it is quick firing. And for this, it needs the glycogen stores that are in our muscle to work. And the glycogen stores have been built up through the glucose that our body has gotten through eating carbohydrates. So that kind of, in a nutshell, is why as runners we would want to be consuming carbohydrates to help fuel our high intensity runs. I do see an awful lot of myths around carbohydrates and why they get such a bad rep. One of the biggest ones I see is that consuming carbohydrates will make you fat, or consuming carbohydrates will prevent you from losing weight if you're looking to lose weight. So it is important to note that consuming large quantities of carbohydrates can have an impact on the scale weight. So only the weight that we see on the scale. So when our body stores glycogen, for roughly every 1 gram of glycogen that is stored, 3 to 4 grams of water are also stored with it. This can impact the scale weight. So it doesn't mean if you went out and ate loads of chips that you would have gained fat. You would have put on maybe a little bit of scale weight through the process of eating carbohydrates and then being stored with water. But this isn't always a bad thing. Certainly if you're marathon training or even half marathon training and you're carb loading, you would probably see the scale weight go up. But again, this isn't due to an increase of body fat that is being held onto. This is simply the increase of glycogen stores within our body and the water that is stored with them. But this isn't a reason to avoid them. They support our running, and as we have discussed, when we're doing those high intensity interval sessions, we need those glycogen stores that our body has built up to allow us to perform optimally at the level that we want to. That is not saying that we should just consume carbohydrates. Of course, we need to balance our carbohydrate consumption with proteins, healthy fats, and our fruits and veggies as well, because these are equally important for health. So I hope this video has helped clear up some of the misconceptions and finally answer that question of, do runners need carbohydrates? If you're looking for any advice around how carbohydrates can support your recovery as a runner, then there'll be a link in the description below for my top 5 recovery mistakes that runners make that gives a little bit more information on how consuming carbohydrates can support your recovery from your running sessions. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe as it helps others see this content. See you next week. Bye.